Who are you, sir?
I'm Raghavendra from the .NET client team, working on like Windows Forms Designer and resources and stuff like that.
Okay, you're a developer?
Yeah, I'm a developer. Yeah.
And we're at the, where are we today? We're in the Xbox room again at...
Yeah, we are at the Xbox room of the Whitby Dev Lab, the component vendor Dev Lab, where we get a chance to talk to. Actually, the component vendors get a chance to come and talk to us and try their components out on the most recent bits and see if everything's working. And if they have problems, they come and we help them sort out their problems and things like that.
Fantastic. So what's the feedback then?
It's been pretty good. Actually, I was at one of these labs which we did in Beta 1, and at that point they had a lot of issues because there's lots of things changed and they were trying to be compatible with what they had, and there were some compat issues that we had, but it was good to see most of those issues resolved now. Like, we got a lot of those bugs and we fixed those, and it's much better now. So it seems like most of it sorted out and they're getting their components working, and they're all excited about Beta 2.
Fantastic. Yeah. And so what exactly do you do on the Windows Forms team?
I work on the designer side of stuff.
Okay, so that's mostly in the IDE?
Yeah, that's in the IDE. Like, there's the Windows Forms designer. I specifically own the serialization and the code generation that happens for Visual Studio in the background.
So when I drag a form, button onto a form, you're writing the code for me.
Yeah. The code that gets generated, the serialization of components on the form and things like that. And also things like localization, like when you switch the form to localizable mode, serialization happens in a different way.
Yeah.
So I own some of that code.
Cool.
And also some other different stuff in system TLL.
So how does that work? Can we talk about that for a little while?
Sure.
So for example, I drag a button onto a form. What exactly are you doing? Like how is the design? How does it work? What's really going on there?
Yeah. So
from your side of things?
Yeah. So you have the form and design view, right? And then you drop something on the toolbox from the toolbox.
Okay.
Then when you go to code view, what happens is there's actually a designer host. So this whole thing is hosted in a designer host.
Okay.
And all the components in this form are kind of cited. They're said to be cited on the designer host. And so when you go to code view, we have these objects called code DOM serializers.
Okay.
And there's something called a type code DOM serializer which works at the root level. So it looks at this form and sees, oh, there's a component here and it has a bunch of properties. We need to know how to serialize. And there are a bunch of rules that are used for serialization, like you can put attributes on the properties which tell how to serialize it. And then it sees the controls collection on the form and it sees, oh, there are other components here which I should serialize. Like it sees the button and it recursively does the same thing. So each component has got a serializer that knows how to serialize that component.
Okay.
And when it looks at properties, it comes across other types that it has to serialize, and there are serializers for other types, and so it's kind of a recursive way in which it works.
Fantastic. Now, are they public types? Public components?
Yeah, these components are public, and yeah, the serialization. Some of it was, not much of it was public in V1, and we had people writing serializers. So you could always write serializers, but it was much harder. So in Whitby, we did a bunch of work to expose more of this functionality out, and it's much easier to write a serializer now. It should be much easier.
So could you write your own design surface?
Yeah, so I actually have code on my blog which shows you how in 7 lines you can host the designer in your app. So just like the designer is hosted in Visual Studio.
Fantastic.
So in 7 lines of code in Whitby, you can host it in your app, and like you have a whole design surface in your app. I mean, so that's kind of the basic stuff. So if you want to do more advanced stuff like the toolbox and stuff, then you would need more code.
And of course, you couldn't host the text editor.
Yeah, so that would be work you have to do, but that's just a big text box, I guess. But, but the IntelliSense and stuff, that's
very
different.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so there's been a lot of changes in Whitby. Are there any new, cool, out-of-the-box objects that people can drag onto their forms in Whitby that weren't there in V1?
Oh, there are a bunch of new controls and components, like the famous,
What's the coolest one?
The coolest one I think is tool strip.
Okay.
The tool strip and the data grid view are the two big Windows Forms components we introduced in Whitby, and the tool strip is extremely versatile. So you can use it as a menu strip, you can use it as a status bar. So it replaces 3 or 4 old different controls, and there's one object model, and it's very powerful. You can control the rendering out of the box, and yeah, that's a component which most of our customers have liked in Whitby. So.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And have there been a lot of cool components being made?
Oh, you mean besides the controls?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we also have like a background, an async worker, which kind of takes the difficulty of the async, which gets the async programming model in an easy to use fashion. So you just drop this component of the form, and it's got some simple methods, and you can get stuff done in a background thread.
And pass it back to the UI thread.
Right, pass it back to the other.
But it doesn't replace the complexity of multi-thread.
Yeah, you still have to think about how to log stuff and things like that.
Absolutely.
But it just
But
it's
it's
just
a
an
great
easy way
idea.
to because most people have difficulty the first time when they get into this programming model about how stuff has to be invoked back on the UI thread, because that's how Win32 works. And
Now, do you know how that was implemented? The
which
async
one?
worker component?
I think so. It was not really hard to do programming in this fashion. Because the control had this method called invoke,
Mm-hmm.
which would call from a different thread, and it would ensure that it happens on the right thread.
Okay.
But it was a little hard to get this to work, and so the component just encapsulates that logic, and it's got a method like do work or something, and
I see.
it's very easy to use. So yeah.
So it was easy to implement.
Yeah, it was kind of a rad component, which means you just do the same thing which you could have done in more lines of code and fewer lines of code. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And rather than have developers write the same thing 100 times, you encapsulated the functionality that should work across
Exactly.
needs.
Yeah.
Because it's important to be able to get data back to the UI thread, like when you find something to
Right.
data grid
Yeah.
or whatever,
Yeah.
asynchronously,
Yeah.
which is often what you want to do, so you don't have to wait in UI and wonder why you're locked.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
which
So
happens
yeah, that's
so often.
yeah. Like when you're getting some stuff out of a web service, you don't want the UI waiting there, and you got the wait sign, and you can't do anything else. And
Absolutely.
so it's very easy. You drop this component on the form and do that.
How many can you use? A number of them? So what if I want to do
sure.
5 asynchronous operations in the background?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, but I think you can. So I think you can drop multiple of them and
Sure.
do various stuff at various points.
Very cool. Very cool. Because that's just such a great way to program for UI applications.
Yep.
Fantastic. So, anything else you want to say?
We go.
That's it. I mean,
Cool. And
so
so
if
you've been here all day?
I've been here for like 3 or 4 hours, around 3 hours now. So just talking with all the component vendors and
Have
looking
there
at
been any really interesting bugs you've been working on that big customers have found?
today.
Yeah.
Not bugs actually, but some of them are not exactly clear about how things work.
Mm.
So I got them to understand a little bit more, so that it's good to see their problems getting solved. Because it's harder for them to communicate when they're not on campus, and like when they come here and try out stuff, they get the latest bits, and
Sure.
so
That's
yeah,
cool.
it's some interesting issues, but
And they can find out how things really work
exactly.
by talking to people who actually built it.
Yeah.
Right? That's fantastic.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, it was great to meet you.
Yeah. Same here.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.